Welcome back into the slipstream. All four of your favorites are in the paddock and ready to hit the track. Brady, Sten, myself, and 1995 Malibu GP bumper kart champion Cole Trickle are here to preview Alfa Romeo for 2023. Only four teams didn't change drivers in the offseason, and Romeo is one of them, but their team principal, Fred Vassar, has moved on to Ferrari for the same role and has been replaced with a combo of Andreas Seidel from McLaren and Alessandro Bravi. Brady, you have their last 5 years of info. How have they fared, and do we think these changes will help, hurt, or just not even matter?
Yes, I think Alfa is probably the biggest question mark going into 2023, but looking back at their last 5 years, 2022, they finished 6th place with 55 points. 2021, they finished in 9th place with 13 points. 2020, 8th place with 8 points. 2019, 8th place with 57, and 2018, also 8th place with 48 points. So for me, my sort of question about Alfa Romeo, at least in 2022, was it not the weirdest 6th place finish in the history of the sport? I mean, they got off to a great start. By the back half of the season, they were awful. So do we look at the positive of the first half or the negative of the second half? And what do we think that that's going to prove out to be in 2023?
It's hard to think that the first half matters more than the second half, right? You know, if sports are always a "what have you done for me lately" type of thing, and they were the worst team in the last 10 races. Williams was better than Alfa Romeo in those last 10 races, so it's hard for me to sit there and think that something that happened before their downfall is a more predictive of what we saw at the end.
So I think I heard some stuff talking about how Alfa Romeo was the only team that came to the first race being on weight limit. So again, there's a minimum weight that you can carry with your driver and your fuel. Sometimes teams, as they go through the regulations, end up adding ballast or extra dead weight just to bring you up to that point. But there were a lot of rumors that Alfa Romeo was the only team that really nailed the weight regulations this year. And I think we've heard that like every kilo or every like 5 kilos is like a tenth per lap. So if they nailed it in the beginning, and other teams started catching up, I think that's where the midfield and the slower cars probably passed. They also might have just started shifting towards 2023 development and could completely blow us away this year. They also could be last place this year. There's a very big scale there. But if you look at it, I think across both drivers, they had 11 total DNFs. I think Bottas had 5 DNFs in the last 9 races. So yeah, he started off really well at 8 of the first 9 races he got points. 1 was the DNF, and maybe the 10th race he didn't get points. But they really fell apart at the end. And I don't know if it's again lack of development, if other teams just developed better, or the car became much more unreliable. But I mean, that many DNFs. Joe DNF'd 4 of 6 races. And Bottas DNF'd 3 in a row and 4 out of 6 races. That's terrible.
Yeah, I remember Bahrain last year, right? Season kickoff, new regulations. We didn't really know what to expect, right? I mean, the whole point was to even the field, and we wanted to see if that did or didn't play out, right? Bottas qualified, I think, 6th. He beat the Mercedes. So you're kind of like, all right, Bottas, a little chip on his shoulder, getting replaced at Mercedes for George Russell. Maybe these new regulations really are evening out that field. And so, yeah, Alfa Romeo got off to an awesome start last year. Going back to my comment about Alfa Romeo finishing 6th is kind of the weirdest 6th place ever, is because Valtteri Bottas basically had all of their points last year. And he had 49 of the 55 points for Alfa Romeo last year. he only scored 3 points in the last 13 races. So, Stin, to your point, either A, they were the first ones to get the new regulations right very early, or at least had some advantage, and it just never improved throughout the season, and everyone else either caught up and surpassed them. But 3 points in the last 13 races. Valtteri Bottas still finished 10th place in the Drivers' Championship last year, but it felt like he was irrelevant for half of the season. I really don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I mean, as a team,
I think Alfa and Ferrari started out the two teams probably with the most hype after week 1, week 2. I think everyone thought that those were the teams that were going to kind of surprise everybody, and those were the two teams who fell off almost the most. So I don't have high expectations for what they're going to do in 23, but I think 24 and beyond, I think with the future of Audi and where they're going and how it's going to play out, I think this year is just going to be kind of a let's just survive, but I do not see them moving forward at all.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at those finishes, Brady, like you mentioned. Like, of Bottas's, again, 6 first races, he had a DNF in Saudi Arabia in week 2. But look at, like, if I were to say blindly, without telling you who it was, who finished in 6th, 8th, 5th, 7th, 6th in their first 5 finishes in the season, you would not have thought it was Alfa Romeo at all.
Yeah, 5th at Imola. And it was they just literally fell off a cliff.
And Imola wasn't even a track, again, where I'll bring up that, like, there was just chaos, or, you know, Singapore or in Japan or whatever. Like, Imola had a little bit of rain, but other than Leclerc spinning out and recovering, there really wasn't any craziness. Like, it was just hard to overtake people if you were in a DRS train. He just happened to be leading the midfield DRS train the entire way.
yeah, it was just very. I mean, he was by far a top 6 or 7 driver in that first 10 race stretch. Bottas was, and it's funny, as Brady, you said, they just fell off a cliff. They fell off a cliff from how they performed, but in the first 12 races, they were 6th. In the last 10 races, they scored 1 point and still finished 6th. It just shows how much of a gap they had created. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 2023. As Cole said, it's essentially almost a lame duck season for them. Joe's last year of his contract, kind of new guys running it. Audi's coming in. They didn't have any driver changes, but it just seems like a weird vibe around them going into this next season.
It's interesting too that if you go off feels, like, oh, you know, like watching the races last year in 2022, like Joe, it felt like Joe was doing fine. I would have compared his output to Yuki's rookie year, just based on feel. Like, he was competitive, he was making passes, he almost died. Like, there's a lot of different things there, but he felt like he was really in it. And I don't know if he probably didn't get his feet underneath him until the rest of the field had already caught up. But again, you made the point that they scored so few points in the last half of the season. The backfield and low midfield was so bad that Alfa Romeo had 5, 6, 7 good weeks and coasted into their finish. That's why I wouldn't be shocked if they were last next year. And I could kind of see them being 6th randomly, just because they have talent. They just need to put it together.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, I don't know if I could sit here and say Joe made a lot of rookie mistakes, right? To your point about Yuki made a lot of rookie mistakes, right? He was clearly a rookie on the track. I feel like Joe had a lot of moments where you were kind of impressed, and then 2 laps later, he was in the pits DNFing for no fault of his own. So I feel like he was sort of given a pretty awful disservice last year. I don't think his performance on track and where he finished in the standing is indicative to the talent that he has. I do think he's a talented driver. I just hope that Alfa Romeo gets their together and can actually finish races and give him a chance to prove to everyone that he's deserving of a longer term opportunity in the sport. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
So with that, devil's advocate on your question, but I will start with a positive. In races that he did finish, his average place in finish was higher than 3 people that finished in the standings above him, which was Yuki, Mick, and Magnussen. So in a place, not in points, but in places, he did fare better than them. But I will say, devil's advocate, if he wasn't making rookie mistakes last year and he finished where he did, does he actually have much more room to grow? Because if he's already not making those mistakes, and he was already finishing where he was, how much more growth is there for him?
So, Cole, you might disagree here, but I think there's a lot of growth, specifically in the car. Like, the car fell off so poorly that even compare him to Bottas in those last races. I would be intrigued to see how he compared to Bottas, who has been driving a team, a constructors winning vehicle for 4 years, has been in second in the championship. Like, he wasn't really that far off how Bottas was finishing, maybe like 2 points or 2-3 places in the last half of the year. Cole, what are your thoughts?
I don't see this pairing being here long term. I think that I think he didn't make many rookie mistakes, and I think he's a great driver, and so is Valtteri. But I think that with new sponsorship, new dollars, Audi's coming. So I think that they will get through this year. They'll get through maybe next year, but I think Lando is who they're hitching to get in for a handful of seasons from now with the McLaren tie, with the team principal. But I don't see Zhou being the answer. I don't see Valtteri staying long term. He has a few years on his contract, but I think they will be looking to rebrand completely at the end of next season.
And Cole,
Sten, to your point, how Zhou and Valtteri fared together in that last half. Valtteri did have 2 more DNFs than Zhou, but his average place was only 0.3 better than Zhou in that last half. So they're fairly equal on output.
Yeah, like they weren't that far off. I don't think it was Zhou not performing. I think the car just didn't live up to the requirements or expectations in the latter half of the year. And again, we might all be blown away that they nailed 2023 because they lifted off the gas completely coming out of like Baku last year, for all we know.
And Cole, back to your comments. It feels like Sauber, not Alfa. I think Alfa Romeo, to your point, might be out of the sport within not the team, but like the sponsor after this year, right? There's a lot of rumor. There's a lot of talk about 2026. So it almost feels like with the Andreas Seidel move that they're sort of looking to the future in that regard. And maybe there's a lot of sort of good things that will come out of that. And they're just sort of getting through the next 3 years however they can. But yeah, I mean, I think Zhou has talent. I'd like to see him have a consistent, reliable vehicle under his feet for a whole season. He scored points in his very first race. We were all excited, but I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier, where Alfa Romeo got it right early and then just either didn't develop or something happened and they fell off a cliff. So to me, just based on results in the last half of the year, there's definitely reasons for pessimism. But I think they've got a decent driver lineup. I think Zhou has talent, as I mentioned. I mean, we know what Valtteri is. He's been in the sport for about 10 years. Maybe he's on his way out after this year. I don't know. But they're sort of the one where I don't really know what to expect for this season.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that growth, if we want to say growth from the car, comes from the fact of they just finish races. they had 10 DNFs in essentially 44 races, almost, just over 20%. Ferrari was second. Apparently, Ferrari, I know it wasn't all engine issues, but Ferrari engine cars had 24 DNFs in 2022. So if they can get the car right, if they can just get it across the finish line, that's just huge in of itself. And you have a better, obviously, if you finish, you can't score points if you don't finish. So the more you finish, the better chance you just luck into a point here or there.
We're gonna get into Ferrari obviously later on, but if you're Ferrari, right, and you're looking at the team who's DNF'd more than you, and you're thinking to yourself, that's the team principal that I want to come and run my team next year. The team that started hot and then the team that DNF'd the rest of the season. It seems, I hope that's not the case, but it seems like such a Ferrari move all of a sudden that they bring in Fred. I hope it's great for the team because obviously he and Charles go way back for Charles being in Formula One, but it just kind of feels like a Ferrari move a little bit.
So on that point, looking at the future of Alfa Romeo this season and beyond, I have a question for you guys. Will either, neither, or both Joe and Bottas be back in 2024?
Neither. I can elaborate on it. I think that we're cleaning house. I think we're just surviving for this season, rebranding just as Sauber for a full Audi push after. So neither.
I say you'll get one. I say probably Bottas is still in there. I don't know if Joe's in the sport. Obviously the car does well and they finish super high. It may not matter, but if I was a bet man, I'd say we're at least having some turnover next year.
It's interesting. I really liked Cole's answer that you just, again, leave the training wheels on this year, save a lot of budget, and go all out next year. I think we might see 2 new drivers.
Yeah, answering my own question, I think I lean that direction. I do. For those that have been listening to us for a little while, know that Bottas has been there for 10 years, right? He was a great teammate to Lewis. They won a lot of champions. I love Valtteri, great guy, funny guy off the track, right? You kind of know what he is. And so if I'm leaning in one direction, or if I was the team principal, which I will never be, I could see Joe coming back in 2024 and Valtteri being out of Formula One after the season.
More time mountain biking.
Mountain biking and booty picks.
Who doesn't love a good... what about a booty pick on a mountain bike? Just double whammy it for him.
You guys have seen the video of Valtteri handing the water bottle off to his fiance or his girlfriend Tiffany at the bike race. Have you seen the video? Because if you haven't, it is incredible how fast these girls are ripping by on a bike. And there's Valtteri with his bucket hat on. He's got his water bottle out. It was awesome. Valtteri has a great social media. And 2 things I'm going to say before I can be done with it for Alfa Romeo. Wheels of the season. They had the best looking wheels, so credit for that. And Valtteri gets haircut of the season, post-season with the mullet. So respect to the wheels and to the mullet, Valtteri.
He follows our social media and realized that my 7-year-old cut a mullet for soccer season in the fall and said that it was so amazing that he wanted to mirror my son. So Valtteri, I know you're listening. I appreciate you being inspired by little Stin. I appreciate that.
What I got last shout out for Valtteri is Grid Rivals. First and foremost, thank you for doing what you do. Secondly, Valtteri, thank you for winning me the season. I appreciate it. I bought you early. I rode you for a few weeks. Everyone else missed out on that train. My salary went through the roof, and I got to just coast the rest of the season. So, Valtteri Bottas, Grid Rivals, thank you so much.
And before we sign off with Alpha, I do want to say one thing that happened, breaking news within the last couple of days of us recording this podcast, is they do have a new title sponsor for 2023. So that is obviously good news when that happens. And maybe this is foreshadowing to Alfa Romeo's exit out of Formula One, but they do have they're marking the dawn of a new era with Team Stake is the announcement for their record-breaking new title partnership with one of the world's leading entertainment and lifestyle brands. Stake creates a new identity for teams. So good for them. Again, I think this is a foundational move to them to sort of set up and potentially in combination with Audi and others for the future. So it's not all doom and gloom. We haven't really talked predictions yet for Alfa Romeo. They obviously ended poorly last year, but new title sponsor, maybe there's good things to come in 2023 and beyond.
I will say, going into with this whole transition, they have one of the worst liveries in the entire sport. So hopefully with the changes in title sponsor and Audi and all that, we get a better picturesque car on the track. But it has been, I feel like we just spent however long just shitting on Alpha to an extent, but let's just get it on out. Place, we'll go with Sten first. Where do you see them finishing in 2023?
I mean, I've said it twice already. I feel like they could be 6th. I feel like they could be 10th. I think based on what Cole had said, just trying to focus on growing it, doing it the right way for 2024. I don't think that they perform well, and I'm going to say that they're back at the grid, putting all of their eggs into the 2024 launch budget and design. Minimal updates from last year's car to now. Just pushing it like Haas did 2 years ago, just trying to get to the new regs.
They're tanking for first. That's the goal. All in for Audi. Gives them a couple years to just buy their time to get everything set up for it. Full push for Lando is what I think they'll move for. I think dead last, 10th place, maybe 10th place for a couple years. But when Audi comes, I think that's when that team will start to turn around.
For me, I was debating either Alpha or Aston being my hot take of the preview season. I think Aston in a positive light, meaning I think they're going to go from sort of further down to further up. I really kind of want to put Alpha 10th, but I think Williams will finish 10th, as we talked about in our earlier episodes, just because they have too much going against them with the rookie driver and resources and turnover and all that. So there's a part of me that wants to put Alpha 10th, but I'm going to go 9th for Alfa Romeo for 2023. And I'm going to go hot take. This is Valtteri Bottas's last season. I'm not rooting for that. Put it out there, but just a prediction.
I'm going to disagree on the Bottas, but I am going to agree on the place. I don't think they can be 10th. I just don't think they can be as bad as Williams. But I do think that there's kind of a tanking mindset to get more wind tunnel time, to be able to, get a leg up in the future with everything that's coming their way. So I do think that I think they're going to fall. I think they'll be 9th. I don't think the first half of the season was predictive of anything. I just think they hit the nail on the head on the weight regulations and then just couldn't keep up with the rest of the season. And that'll do it. That'll wrap it up for Alfa Romeo, our 2023 team preview. We've got every single team coming. Next will be McLaren. We're starting to get up into the upper midfield to the top dogs coming up. So make sure you download the podcast, like, follow, subscribe to all the social medias. And we're here for any and every bit of info you need for your Formula One itch going into 2023. So we'll check you next time.